Does that make sense? When Darlene and I got married, we made a choice. We said, if we have problems, we're committed to working them out. If we have differences, we're committed to living with them or changing. But the bottom line is we have made a commitment. We have made a choice. Do I ever feel like leaving the ministry? Absolutely. But I made a choice and said, God, I believe that you're calling me. And it would take a blinding light from heaven right now for me to quit. Doesn't take much for me to want to quit. But for me to really quit, it would take a call from God. He would have to say, Bill, you've fulfilled your obligation. You're finished. Now, I don't know. Some of you may be there this morning, and all of us are going to be there sooner or later. Think about it in terms of your marriage. Think about it in terms of your education, whether or not you go back to school or you continue the education process. Think about it in terms of your faith and serving God. In terms of your own life. There are no promises from God that tomorrow's going to be any better than today. I wish I could tell you that if you faithfully trust Jesus, tomorrow will be a better day. But it may not be. Actually, it may be a worse day. But I can tell you this. If you stay with Jesus, God will always be with you. You will never face anything alone. And I would rather be on a ship sinking with hope than to jump into the water where I knew I was going to die for sure. I believe that's what the Christian life is all about. The last thing I want to say to you, sometimes we encounter a person who has been through a horrible ordeal, such as the young minister that I talked with last night. And I said to him, I do not believe that your life or your ministry is over. The world is much bigger than that church you pastored. The world is much bigger than a single denomination. If God is calling you to serve, then find your place of service. A shipwreck does not mean that your life is over. Now, when we saw in the video at the very first of the service, the overturned boat, then you see all the water that surrounds it. There's an assumption. These guys could not have survived. But the truth is, one did survive. He survived by staying with the ship. And then he told a horrible story. At least 2 of his friends gave up, removed their life jackets, and floated out to sea. Don't give up because you've experienced disappointment or a tragedy. Don't give up because there are troubled waters around you. There's a possibility that God sent the storm that rattles your cage right now. And if your ship has wrecked, there's this chance that God wants you to swim to the shore because that's your next mission assignment. Remember Paul when King Agrippa sentenced him and sent him from Caesarea over to Rome? And the ship sank? 276 people on board the ship, all survived, every single one. They spent 3 months on the island of Malta. And then Paul was sent from Malta to Rome, but not to live in a prison cell, but to live in a Roman rental house. Those 3 months on the island changed Paul's life. Those 2 years in Rome changed the lives of countless others. And it all happened because of a shipwreck. Paul said to the man in charge, hey, don't hurt yourself, man. We're all here. This is about what God is doing. This is about God's plan. If you are on a deserted island, if you are in the process of a shipwreck, remember that it may not be the disaster you think. It may be a blessing from God. Maybe the greatest opportunity you've had to minister. Being a prisoner on a ship that takes you where God wants you to go is the safest place you can be. Paul passes that knowledge along to Timothy. He said, Timothy, if this is where God wants you to be, this is where God called you. Pastoring this church is what God wants you to do. Then you're safe. God's armada. One ship is obedience. Obey God. That's the flagship. Another ship is caution. We have to be extremely careful in life because there are hidden icebergs, coral reefs. We can be destroyed. So we have to proceed cautiously. Third ship is faithfulness. No matter what happens to you, be faithful to God. There's no excuse. Sometimes we stop being faithful to the Lord because of something that's going on, but you know, Paul's saying to Timothy, there is no excuse for not being faithful to God. Fourth ship is optimism. To believe that the Coast Guard is coming to the rescue, to believe that the helicopter will see you, to believe that God cares and knows what you're facing.